Welcome back to the Road to the Final Score, brought to you by Bet365. This is our Cinderella draft. We had to run it back this year because we were on fire last year. We won our very first Cinderella pick with Furman knocking off Virginia in a classic, and then we didn't win a game for the rest of the tournament. But
real quick, who won the bracket last year?
Who's to say? Graphics team, we actually don't have that information. But we are bringing back our illustrious panel here. Anthony DeBundo, Charlie DeSturco, I'm Mike Calabrese. We are going to run through another Cinderella draft. We've made some alterations to the rules. Hopefully we can score some more upsets and some teams making their way into the second weekends. But let's go through some of those rules here and how we're going to play this game. So, for starters, each guest on our panel has 2 units to spread across the 3 rounds of our draft. Everyone will end up with 3 teams, so you get to be a little bit strategic in how you're placing your bets. All double-digit seeds are eligible. That includes the play-in games in the Dayton elements of this tournament, with teams using that as a springboard, perhaps to go to the second weekend. Once a team is drafted, they are no longer eligible to be used. And whoever is up the most units at the end of the tournament lives happily ever after. We're going to have more than a few Cinderella puns, and hopefully none of us turn into pumpkins here. All right, last night we went ahead, threw our names in a hat, we pulled it out, and DeBundo is going to lead us off with his first pick.
Actually, I'm leading us off.
Oh, wait.
I won the draft. Come on.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to make sure that DeBundo has a chance to repeat. But I
guess champion, yeah.
I guess you can go first.
It's only fair for me to go first, considering I went 0 for the last time. So my first pick, and this is the first bet I placed into the app when the bracket dropped, and that's Grand Canyon here against St. Mary's. I'm putting 0.6 of a unit on them to beat Mary's at this 2-to-1 number, and I'm also going with a half unit on their Sweet 16 price at plus 650. And listen, guys, we're gonna talk Prince Charming here. Tying Grant Foster is the guy to know. He is a downhill physical forward, draws nearly 7 fouls every 40 minutes. He's one of the guys that gets to the line, finishes at an efficient rate, can stretch the floor, and also one of the best dunkers you'll see in the entire NCAA tournament. Also perhaps the greatest story that we're following entering the tournament. He's a 3-time transfer, started out a Kansas kid going to Kansas University, then transferring to DePaul, where he suffered in cardiac arrest and missed 16 total months from basketball, away from basketball, transfers out of DePaul, comes to Grand Canyon, wins against San Diego State in non-conference, the first time they ever beat a ranked opponent. The Lopes are for real. This guy is the real deal as well. I love the story here. He's a defensive beast. He's an offensive beast. Averages about 20 and 6. So I think he's going to lead Grand Canyon to an upset here.
So beyond what Foster Grant brings in terms of his backcourt play, Ray Harrison also is the Robin to his Batman. Talk a little bit about him.
Well, in general, it's just the offense in general is just electric, right? You talk about their ability to do rim and 3. They're an elite offensive rim and 3 rate. The ability to have 2 backcourt guards that can take over a game and score at a microwave ability, that is what you need altogether. So in Grand Canyon, you look at this game against St. Mary's, is if you could score against them and they're slow paced and put them in a downfall and speed them up, I think that this is going to be a perfect recipe for Grand Canyon. And also just quickly, they're a top 10 rim defense for shot quality and Ken Pom. St. Mary's, almost 40% of their attempts come at the rim. And they're also down in the front court. Mitchell Saxon's their starter, but if he gets into foul trouble, we don't have Joshua Jefferson. They don't have possibly Harry Wessels, who's missed the last 5 games. We don't have Mason Forbes possibly, who went down in the WCC championship with a very hard fall. So you look at this all together, and you look at Grand Canyon, a downhill physical team that gets to the line at a top 5 rate in the country. I just think all this culminates in an upset here. I think that this spread, I love the spread too. I think they're more than live to make a Sweet 16 run, maybe even blink, and you're seeing them up against UNC in that game if chalk holds. I love the Lopes here. I love the Havocs. They're going to be going crazy up in Spokane. So I'm going to go with Grand Canyon here as my first pick.
I know the coaches don't want to overlook their first-round opponent, but you're looking to them to win a game in the round of 32. How do you see them matching up potentially in that round?
Yeah, so, I mean, if they win, right, against St. Mary's, they'll get the winner of Alabama and College of Charleston. And both these teams are high-volume three-point shooting teams. And I think that matches up well with Grand Canyon. They run you off the line. They force you into their interior defense where they're really good at the rim. Teams try to beat them up inside. They have the size and the physicality to do that. And their biggest problem is turnovers. St. Mary's can't force turnovers. Alabama sure as heck doesn't force turnovers, and neither does the College of Charleston. So they're going to have established possessions. They're way more physical than every single team that they're going to face in this couple of rounds off the rip. And I just think this culminates in a Cinderella team. Their offense is very slept on. They have, like you mentioned, multiple microwave scorers. And I think Grant Foster is going to make a name for himself. 16 months away from basketball, comes to Grand Canyon, is going to not only get them their first ranked win, but also a great NCAA tournament win against Mary's, and then possibly even further here with a fraudulent Alabama team that's outside the top 60 over the last month in efficiency.
Tony, was Grand Canyon on the top of your wish list here, or do you have another team in mind?
Yeah, I mean, when you're targeting an upset team, St. Mary's plays really slow. They execute really well on the late shot clock. That's a risky approach if the shots aren't falling. They don't get a lot of volume as a result either. So, a potential red flag for Mary is going up against a Canyon team that can score from everywhere. They were not at the top of my board. The team at the top of my board, my New Mexico Lobos, our New Mexico Lobos. I don't even know what you'd call them at this point, but I think it's a really interesting season when you consider just how much they were injured in the first half of the season. Jamal Mashburn missed most of non-conference play, and he is back now. Donovan Dent was sick for the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They still managed to beat San Diego State. They finished really strong with 4 wins and 4 to get into the tournament. But the reason that I'm buying New Mexico is their guard play. Guards win in March. Eddie House's son, Jalen House, 5th-year senior, transferred from Arizona State. He's been at New Mexico for 3 years. Of the 25 best defenders in this tournament, per Evan Maya's box plus-minus ratings, he's the 25th best. And so he's a defender who can kind of affect the game, even though he's only 6 foot tall. He gets a lot of steals, he cuts passing lanes, and he helps cover up for the fact that Mashburn himself is not a great defender. So I think they have a great backcourt that can take over any game. And I think they got a friendly matchup against a Clemson backcourt, which doesn't guard particularly well. Joe Girard has been a lackluster defender. We've watched him at Syracuse for multiple years. He can score from anywhere, but he's also easy to beat off the dribble.
Right.
And then I think they're going to get into that Clemson interior defense, which has been pretty weak this year. A lot of the ACC top defenses really weren't great, and you saw that Clemson was inconsistent down the stretch because they weren't getting enough stops. The last time we saw them, they lost by 20 to Boston College in the ACC tournament. So I think there's real question marks about Clemson here, who was overseeded as a 6, New Mexico underseeded as an 11, and thus they're plus 275 to make the Sweet 16. That's going to be my pick here, because I also think they match up really well with Baylor. And Baylor's biggest red flag in this tournament, they are an elite shot-making offense, but they are not a great rebounding team. They are not a good turnover team. They lose the turnover margin more often than they win it. And in March, shot volume is everything. New Mexico takes care of the ball. Baylor does not. So when you have great shot-making guards, I'm going to trust that New Mexico is going to be live to pull off a second upset, or a first upset, since they're technically favored against Clemson, to get to the Sweet 16. I think they have a real chance here. They're able to really push transition offense, too, and that's kind of my glass slipper for them, because they run in transition at one of the highest rates in the country. They play really fast. They can execute in the half court, but Clemson especially grades out really poorly, below average nationally in transition defense per shot quality. So we've got a weak transition defense, a weak perimeter defense going up against elite guards, and I think New Mexico is live to make a run here.
Are you worried at all with PJ Hall? Because I think that that's the biggest thing that my concern is that when I look at this matchup and I look at New Mexico as a whole, is that at times we've seen their forwards really get exploited by some of the Mountain West bigs, like great Asabor and everyone out, Dagenhart, like guys that are bigger, stronger, physical around the rim. A guy like PJ Hall can stretch the floor. That's my biggest concern altogether. Are you worried with him at all?
Certainly, it's a concern. If you watch the Mountain West Championship, for example, like Jaden Ledee didn't really do much for the first 15 minutes, and then he was really imposing himself in that second half and led the San Diego Charge back. But they do have more depth in the front court. Last year, it really was just layup lines against New Mexico. You watched Utah State carve them open with the pick and rolls in that game. I don't think that Clemson can be as efficient against this New Mexico team, because New Mexico actually grades out better defensively. And even if you go into their non-conference stuff when Mashburn was out, the offense struggled, but the defense was pretty good at the rim, even without him. And so I think, it's been a consistent trend all year. The reason I've kind of been a believer in this New Mexico team, their rim defense is a lot better than it was last year.
All right, the elephant in the room. They are from the Mountain West Conference.
Yes.
They are not playing this game at altitude.
I know.
How do you respond to that? Do you think it's just one of those overplayed narratives that impacts, public perception, or do you think there's something to the fact that even though they were able to survive through a rugged conference schedule, a lot of the games are played at altitude and now basically down at sea level? Does it make a difference? Is this just much to do about nothing?
Yeah, I mean, look, the case for it is that teams, they get an outsized home court advantage, and there's no denying that the Pit is one of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball. They play at almost 5,000 feet in New Mexico, and they play a lot of home games there, thus their metrics get inflated, right? That's the case. And then when they get down to sea level, they're actually like 3 to 4 points worse than we think the market suggests. I think it's a very possible situation here and something that has to be considered. But I think one of the other issues for the Mountain West has been that they're at an athleticism disadvantage sometimes. They are pulling guys down from high major transfers with this roster, and they have pulled in athletic talent at the front line. So I think this New Mexico team is better equipped than, say, a Boise State or even a Colorado State to handle playing against high major talent like Clemson, who themselves is limited defensively. You're not getting an elite defensive team that's going to really force a ton of turnovers and apply a ton of ball pressure. So I like their guards enough to get to overcome that, but I'm fully prepared to get hurt again if the Mountain West crumbles upon itself this week.
All right, I'm finally off the bench into the game here. I get to make my pick for the Cinderella draft. I'm going to go ahead with Drake. Drake playing less than 2 hours from their hometown of Des Moines, Iowa, going to Omaha. I think the home crowd's going to make a big difference here. And it helps that they're bringing a dude, a future NBA player, a Prince Charming, if you will. Tucker DeVries is one of the best players in the entire country. He's a stat sheet stuffer, averages 22-7, 3.5 assists per game, shoots better than 36% from long range. And when they played quality teams down the stretch, when you look at his performances against 3 teams in this field and their 3 games against Indiana State, he averaged nearly 27 points per game. So when they need him to elevate his play, he's more than capable of doing that. Now, they do have some issues, and it's a reason why that they weren't even on the bubble. They needed to win in Arch Madness, win those 3 games to be able to punch their ticket. And the issue has been their defense. They're 75th in Ken Pom defense, but you can really carve them up inside. They're in the mid-200s in terms of 2-point percentage defense, and for that reason, offensive rebounding becomes a really big issue for the Bulldogs, particularly against a Washington State team with Isaac Jones that can crash the glass and Iowa State that can take advantage of a smaller Drake squad. But when I look at what Drake's done this year, their one calling card is their 7th in defensive rebounding percentage. So if they can get some stops and some balls don't go in, clang off the rim, they're able to collect those rebounds. Now, additionally, when I look at them winning not just 1, but let's call it 2 in Omaha, I think the value is there. I'm going to go with 0.5 units at plus 570 for them to make the second weekend. And a big part of that is how hot they are coming into this tournament. They're 10-1 straight up. And they had all the pressure on them down the stretch in their last 11 games. They needed to win out, as I mentioned, in Arch Madness in St. Louis. They were able to do it. They were able to slay Indiana State, who had been playing at such a high level. I believe they were the highest rated net team not to make the field in the history of the NCAA tournament. Yep. And additionally, a stat that Evan Mia puts out, he's made it into his name brand, the kill shot metric. They have had 24 kill shots, runs of 10 or better this season. And when you think about March Madness, it's about running teams off the floor, capitalizing on that momentum, and really cashing in. And I think Drake's a team that can get it done in that regard. What do you guys think about the Bulldogs, who arguably for much of the season were in the shadow of Indiana State? The Sycamores were viewed as this offensive juggernaut, but it was them punching the ticket out of the MVC and not Indiana State.
The Valley's had a lot of success in the tournament, right? We've seen it. Even the teams that now were in the Valley that aren't in the Valley anymore, that have been so good in the tournament, they've gotten invites into the bigger leagues. And I think Drake last year ultimately had that brutal loss where they couldn't handle the press. They kind of choked late against Miami, but that was ultimately a Final Four team that they had beat. And really won in the underlying box score until those last couple minutes. So Drake has proven themselves on that stage. They've proven they can compete upper against high major talent. So I certainly think they're live here, and they're playing a Washington State team that overperformed all of our expectations this season and didn't quite finish strong in their conference.
When you talk about holding your own against quality opponents, another MIA statistic in terms of the opponent adjust metric, playing up and playing your best basketball against the best quality opponents on your schedule, Drake was 24th nationally. So I don't think the stage is going to be too big for them. I don't think they're going to be scared away by the athleticism of either Iowa State or Wazoo.
And they were able to blow the doors off of Nevada in the past. Mm-hmm. And that's another physical team. And say what you want about the Mountain West, but I think they were one of the teams that was underseeded, that got screwed out of this seeding tournament-wise, and they're actually an A-plus team. And for Drake, that has the offensive capabilities that they do, and they don't turn the ball over, they shoot the ball well, they play some of the most sound basketball in all of the NCAA. I think that's a testament to how good that they can be. And like Dundo said, like we talked about the overperformance of Washington State, their moneymaker is using their length and their ability to crash the glass, like you said, and that's an area that Drake is excellent in. They'd rather give up the shots and let these guys who are inefficient shot takers just take these mid-rangers and these threes and then clean up and keep positions more at a minimum, slow the game down just slightly. I love the Drake Bulldogs also out of this one.
All right, let's take a look at a recap here now that round one is in the books. We can go through each individual pick. Grand Canyon being selected by Charlie, going with them defeating St. Mary's in the round of 64 at 2-1, and then also a bit more of a long shot, Grand Canyon to make it to the Sweet 16 at 5-1. Dundo throwing caution to the winds, saying the hell with altitude, we'll go ahead and play you anywhere, anytime. New Mexico to make the Sweet 16 at plus 275. They have an interesting matchup, as he mentioned, in that opening round against Clemson, but a Baylor team that may have the DNA of a team to flame out early in the tournament as opposed to one to make a deep run. And then my pick, the Drake Bulldogs at plus 570 to make the Sweet 16, needing to beat both Wazoo and likely Iowa State in Omaha. The Cinderella draft is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anyone else. And they don't stop there. College basketball showpiece competition takes place this month, and if you can correctly predict the outcome of every game with Bet365, you'll scoop up a top prize of $10 million. That's a cool $100,000 up for grabs for the players who score the most points throughout the NCAA basketball tournament as well. Make sure you join Bet365 and play your bracket for free before the opening round 1 games tip off. It's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 or older or 18 and older in Kentucky and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms and conditions and restrictions apply. All right, we're going to go over to Dr. Nick. Nick Giffin's going to give us his favorite Cinderella pick for this year.
Thanks, guys. I'm Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network, and I've got 2 Cinderella picks for you all for this 2024 March Madness. My first one, I'm going to the bottom half of the South region, and I'm taking the Colorado Buffaloes to make a run all the way to the Elite 8 in my bracket. I have Colorado power rated as the 22nd best team in this tournament, which would ordinarily place them at around a 6 seed. So the angle here is they have a great path because they have an overseeded 2-seeded Marquette, who I have as the worst 2 seed, an overseeded 3-seeded Kentucky, who I have as the worst 3 seed, and Texas Tech is a 6 seed that grades out more like a 7 seed. And I actually have Colorado rated ahead of Texas Tech in my power rating. So all about the projected path here with, overseeded higher seed teams. It makes that path to the Elite 8 a little bit easier than if you're facing tougher 2, 3, or 6 seeds. For my second pick, I am going to go with the Grand Canyon Antelopes to make a run here. First round matchup against the St. Mary's Gales. And look, St. Mary's, they do 2 things defensively absolutely amazingly. Top 3 rates in the nation in defensive rebounding as well as shot stopping, 2 of the 4 major defensive factors. But Grand Canyon is poised to negate those exact 2 advantages that St. Mary's has because Grand Canyon draws fouls at the 10th highest rate in the nation when adjusted for schedule here. So Grand Canyon getting to the line a lot will mean St. Mary's isn't going to be able to stop their shots, and a 75+% free throw shooting team will leave fewer rebounds available when they're shooting their shots from the free throw line for St. Mary's to grab. On the other side of the ball, St. Mary's themselves does not draw fouls at a high rate, which is tough for them because Grand Canyon is actually a great shot stopping team with a top 10 field goal efficiency defense. So I think this is a very tough matchup for St. Mary's. Their strengths are completely negated, and you add in the slow pace here, fewer possessions for St. Mary's to realize their advantage. I like Grand Canyon to have a shot getting past them. Then they would face likely Alabama. Alabama shoots 3-point attempts at a top 20 rate nationally, and it's all about 3-point variance here. If they are missing a few extra than they ordinarily would, maybe Grand Canyon makes a couple extra than they ordinarily would, all of a sudden you have a game that's pretty close that Grand Canyon could pull off a late upset with their great free throw shooting. So I'm going to take Grand Canyon as my second Cinderella story in this tournament. Guys, back to you.
Thanks to Dr. Nick for his analysis. I'm sure Charlie loved that, adding on to his confidence, building up for Grand Canyon as they enter the NCAA tournament. If you've ever wanted to try the best version of the Action app, the time is now because we're running a special offer on Action Pro. To celebrate the start of the NCAA tournament, you can try Pro Access for just $9.99 for the first month. With Action Pro, you get our biggest betting model edges, real-time money percentages, data-driven systems, NCAA tournament player projections from the predictive analytics team of Sean Kerner and Nick Giffen, and lots more. Just visit actionnetwork.com/madness to take advantage before this deal expires. That's actionnetwork.com/madness. All right, back to our draft. We're going snake style, which means I have another opportunity to add to my portfolio. And I'm going to go with Will Wade. He's worked his way out of NCAA prison. The allegations, the clouds no longer over his head, and he has done a phenomenal job with the Cowboys this year. This team has all the makings of an absolute giant killer. So I'm going to take him in the first round to upset the Zags. Mark Few coming in. And he spent a little bit of the season on the bubble. They played great down the stretch. They are a 5 seed. It is worth noting that in terms of the overall seedings for all 68 teams, they should have been a 6, but BYU not being able to play on Sundays ended up swapping that spot. So Gonzaga drops down from the 6 to the 5, and here comes McNeese with arguably the best point guard in this entire tournament. Shahada Wells, the TCU transfer, is someone who can impact the game in so many ways. He has 3 games this season of 30-plus points. At 6 feet tall, he's grabbed 10 rebounds on 2 separate occasions. He facilitates for his teammates, and he's second nationally in steals per game. Now, their issue, their bugaboo, is very simple. They're short. They are buried in the 300s in terms of overall height for their team, and that has really impacted them on the defensive glass. So are they able to collectively rebound as a squad and keep those easy looks away from the Zags in this game? I'm hoping that they can do that because really it just boils down to Graham Ike. When Graham Ike plays well in their wins, he scored north of 18 points per game, and when he's saddled with foul trouble or he has some issues on the low block and scores less than 12 points per game, that's all 7 of their losses this season. So I really view it that simple in terms of Will Wade putting together a defensive game plan to be able to take Ike away from Mark Few and his staff a little bit and put the onus on that backcourt that I'm still underwhelmed with to a certain degree this season. You know, you look at Nolan Hickman, he was someone who was supposed to elevate his game and kind of play in the tradition of the Zags backcourt, which has been phenomenal really for the last 20 years. He never quite got there for me. So am I seeing this properly, or do you think there's a little too much hate on the Jesuits here in this matchup?
Listen, McNeese was the team that I circled as far as like the team I wanted to bet as far as Cinderella in March. And then I saw the draw with Gonzaga, and that's where I got scared. Because Shahada Wells is incredible, both offensively and defensively, but I think Nembhard is a veteran point guard that is up to the task of that intensity, which is why I was a little bit scared. And then like you mentioned, the height. Like, they couldn't have asked for a worse team to draw than a team like Gonzaga that puts 3 big men out on the court. Ben Gregg, who obviously is more of a stretch guy, but then Watson and Ike, who absolutely dominate inside the paint. But like you mentioned, right, like if Graham Ike finds foul trouble, like he did against St. Mary's, all of a sudden this team is a little bit vulnerable, and their offense kind of relies on that post presence we saw early on in non-con. They didn't really figure it out. I'm just scared because over the past month, they're a top 20 team in college hoops versus a team like McNeese State, but I think they're certainly up for the challenge, right? Like, great coach, great offense, great defense, everything you want in a team. Just the matchup, I was so pissed. If this was BYU, I would have been completely all over McNeese State here.
So when McNeese did play up this year, they took VCU, UAB, Michigan, beat them all by double digits. I know that the Michigan game is more of a name brand and less of what they put on the court this year, but they were able to do it by pressuring the basketball. Almost 20% of opponent possessions end in a turnover. Yeah. Is that going to be enough to make up for, let's call it 12 to 15 offensive rebounds for the Zags in this game? What do you think?
Yeah, I felt coming into the season that this Zag team doesn't have the NBA talent of past Zag teams, and that was going to be their biggest thing. But I agree with you with the point about Hickman and just this backcourt not really being elite, and I think that is ultimately their downfall when we get into, you know, potentially a second-round matchup. But I do think Gonzaga squeaks by here, but I think it'll be tight. So certainly don't mind the long shot or the money line shot on McNeese State, and certainly, you know, the best of the mid-majors, arguably. Them and Drake, probably.
Yep.
Now, it's not just because you're agreeing with me. I'm going to pass you the ball just because it is your point in the draft here. But who are you going with for your second pick?
I'm going to go with the mid-major that won the most games, James Madison. I'm going to take, you know, 2/3 of a unit at plus 195 on the money line for them to beat Wisconsin. Let's keep in mind that Wisconsin coming into this season had largely the same roster from last year. They had one of the highest minutes continuities in the entire country. They got up into the top 10. They were expected to maybe even challenge Purdue at the top of the Big Ten. And it hasn't really come to fruition because they started to falter. They started to regress, kind of back to what I think we really thought this Wisconsin team was. And I think they are ripe for the upset for a variety of reasons. But this James Madison team, they're Prince Charming, TJ Bickerstaff, the transfer from Boston College, 21 points and 14 rebounds in their road game at Michigan State, which really is their resume-defining win this season. The Sun Belt was not particularly a good league, but they got that road win despite making 27% from three in that game. And I know that Michigan State was famously 1 for 20. It was the first game of the season. But the way they guard the line and the way they make threes, I think, gives them an advantage. When you're looking to try to find an upset, you're looking for either a favorite who's vulnerable to turnover margin differential or rebounding issues or three-point variance. I think those are the three biggest ways to kind of affect a game. And for James Madison, they've been elite at taking away the line all year, regardless of opponent, including that Michigan State game, a great shooting team who couldn't make anything that night. And so, you look at Wisconsin, who had a terrible perimeter defense in the Big Ten, a league that's not known for its great perimeter offenses. A lot of the teams in the Big Ten tend to go to the rim more often. So Wisconsin, them being so bad at guarding the perimeter in that league, I think is a huge red flag for them. Prior to their big tourney run, they were in free fall, really. And so I don't think 3 good games and then a loss in the final really changes the reality of this Wisconsin team, which is when the outside shots are not falling, they're simply not that good of a basketball team. They play really slow, and they don't get a lot of extra shot possessions because they don't force turnovers and they don't get offensive rebounds. So Wisconsin's a team I'm looking to pick off, and I think the three-point variance in this game is the biggest key. James Madison, top 60 in the country in open free rate allowed. Wisconsin outside the top 200. There's going to be a lot of open looks for JMU, and I think Wisconsin could be in some trouble here. So give me the Dukes. Roll Dukes.
The public perception is Wisconsin's going to slow the game down. They have this great defense. That's generally how they hang their hat. They want to win rock fights. It is shocking how bad their underlying metrics are defensively. Just running through 282nd in the country in opponent shooting percentage. How did they even make the field? Can you walk through what they needed to do in the Big Ten tournament just to turn around their season?
I mean, if you watched their game against Northwestern, I thought was pretty instructive because Boo Buie comes out and just scores the first 20 points of the game. They're down 10 quickly, and then it was a lot of late shot clock prayer threes that all went in for Wisconsin to fight their way back in and ultimately open that game up. And look, Klesmit can get hot. They have shooters. Chucky Hepburn's been there forever. He's a reliable veteran. But it's the same guys from last year's team that didn't make the NCAA tournament. So I think, we had a great sample of Wisconsin last year. We have them improving a little bit this year. Okay, fair. But the leap they've taken from a 60th-ish team to the top 20 team that the seed line would suggest just isn't really fitting for me. I think they're a little bit overvalued, and I think they're a fade in this tournament. So give me the Dukes, a team that won a lot of games and has a pretty strong core of guys that mesh well together. They don't really have a clear strength or weakness. They're pretty well balanced. So I wouldn't be shocked if they won this game or even 2.
How you've laid out the argument against Wisconsin makes a lot of sense to me. Was there any temptation to take them to go to the Sweet 16?
I was tempted. I took a long shot with my 3rd pick in the draft, so I wanted to go with I want to get something on the board here, especially after last year when one winner won the pool. So for the game theory of the pool, I know we're chasing some long shots here. You guys have some 12-5 upsets. I'm going to take a 12-5 upset of my own, and I'm going to go with James Madison. I ultimately think that in their matchup against Duke, the way they guard the line could potentially be valuable for them if they were to get a Duke matchup in the second round. But ultimately, I think Duke, they don't really have enough to overcome the athleticism advantage Duke would have there.
Back to you, Charlie. Your second pick, you're splitting it up again. At this point, you're putting together a mutual fund. There's so many different investments here, but walk us through your second pick.
After last year where I didn't hit a pick, I got to start spreading it out, get some on the board, maybe make a little bit of a deeper run here. So you guys took a lot of my favorite Cinderella teams, so the next best option that I like here is Morehead State. And they play Illinois, the Big Ten champions. I'm going to take them on the money line. I'm also going to take them to make a Sweet 16 run. This is an interesting team, right? Morehead State, I think, finally clicked it all together with the return of Jordan Lathan. He was injured for a couple games. He returns, they click, they run right through the OVC. And then a guy like Riley Minix is their Prince Charming. He is incredible. If you look, he scored 20-plus points in 14 of the last 16 games. He transferred from a Division II school, Southeastern in Florida, played 4 years there, comes as a grad student, and has been absolutely dominant, leads the team in scoring, is a great rebounder, can stretch the floor as well, can play down low. And Morehead State in general, they have physical bigs inside. They're an above average inside defense, and that's where Illinois altogether tries to attack. And I think the key here is that Morehead State likes to play slow, right? Like when we look at upsets and we look at teams that play upsets, playing a game slow, playing good methodical offense, and just kind of sticking around and then maybe taking a late lead and then having them in a vice grip, like that is what you want in a Cinderella team. And Morehead State does that. Now, obviously the talent discrepancy, there's a difference right here with Terrence Shannon and Marcus Domask against some of the other guys, but you look at Morehead State, they have multiple guys that can heat up and microwave score. They have Minix, they have Lathan, they have Khalil Thomas. Like they have multiple guys that can stretch the floor, that can shoot the three ball lights out. So when you get a team like Illinois that does not force turnovers at all, they're outside the 360th in turnover rate, and that's a pretty weak defensive team in general. They're 93rd. I think we're starting to get a good buy spot on Morehead State because Illinois just ran through the Big Ten. They just won the title. But don't forget the team that won last year, the Big Ten championship, Purdue, fell in the first round. I'm not saying, Purdue and Illinois in the same caliber of opponents, but Morehead State, I like them to win here.
Iowa 2 years ago as well.
Yeah.
Everybody hyped them for a tournament run. They lost the first game to Richmond. So,
right.
The Big Ten has not had a lot of tournament success. I know the Mountain West gets a lot of shtick for their lacking success in the dance. Outside of the jokes people make about Tom Izzo, Michigan State, and their success, the Big Ten has not really had much to kind of hang its hat on come tournament time. And Illinois is one of the proponents of that. We've seen them get a top 4 seed, 2 of the last 3 years, and not get out of the first weekend. So.
And they should have lost to Chattanooga. What was that, 3 years ago? I mean, that was another opportunity. Malachi Smith ends up missing a game winner. They could have got bidden again. I really like Riley Minix's performance when he's played up against quality opponents. 19 against Alabama, 18 against Purdue, double-double against Indiana in a near upset. And when you watch him play, a lot is made of taking away a singular player from a Cinderella. But the issue is that he's in the pick and roll game, slip screens. Like, you can't necessarily double someone in a spot like that. He can put it on the deck and get to the hoop. He can post up. He can shoot threes. So that's a tall order for an Illinois defense that's really played matador defense in the lane. Once you get in there, you get a bucket. So I think there's a chance for him to go for 20 plus.
And their three-point defense is not as good as well. And then you factor that in with a guy like Lathan and a guy like Thomas, both guys that could shoot 40+% from three. You might focus on Riley Minix in the pick and roll, and then all of a sudden one of these guys is open for a catch and shoot. I think this is a perfect culmination where we're going to be late in the game. It's going to be a 50-50 shot at a potential upset here.
You're facing a team that plays a lot of drop coverage. You got to hit mid-range shots. Morehead State 63rd in the country there. So I think that's the first thing I look at with, can this team do it? Do they have shot-making guards who can pick up off the dribble when Coleman Hawkins is dropping into the paint to cover the pick and rolls?
Right, and then after that, BYU, Duquesne. BYU, one of the most inconsistent teams in the country, outside the top 200 in consistency, also 350th away from home per Haslametrics. So
elevation.
Yep. And Morehead State, I think, just has the chance here to make a deep run and could be a Cinderella team for all of us.
All right, let's take a look at a recap of round number 2. Now that's in the books here for our Cinderella draft. I'm going with McNeese to upset the Zags at 2-1. Anthony is on James Madison and their 31 wins to get to 32, up against Wisconsin at plus 195. And Charlie just walked you through the rationale for Morehead State and Riley Minix to not only win in their first game against Illinois at plus 575, but also to make the Sweet 16, taking a flyer there at 22-1. We're going to go now to Dano Mattia for his favorite Cinderella pick from the women's tournament.
Okay, Cinderella time. With the women's tournament, a 7th seed has only made it to the Final Four twice in the last 36 years. So why not this year? The first one definitely would be an ultimate Cinderella story, and that would be the Lady Rebels of Ole Miss. Coach Yo, fantastic coach. This is 500-1 to make the Final Four. They would have to get through Marquette, Notre Dame, and eventually all roads lead to South Carolina to get to the Final Four. South Carolina, best team in the country. I know it's tough, but Ole Miss covered twice against South Carolina this year. Why can't they do it again? And one more Cinderella. I'm taking Duke. Duke at 32-1. They are a team that nobody wants to face. That defense is incredible. Fourth best defensive rating in the country. They're my sleeper of that region. I do love Ohio State. I do love UConn. And I do decently like USC. But if Duke can make it through Ohio State and UConn, I like their chances against the Trojans. Why not? 32-1. Carol Lawson, decent coach, great defense. All you need to do is have a few games of great shooting, and that's a Cinderella.
The Cinderella draft is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anybody else. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. College basketball showpiece competition takes place this month, and if you can correctly predict the outcome of every game with Bet365, you will scoop up a top prize of $10 million. There's also a cool $100,000 up for grabs for players who score the most points throughout the NCAA tournament as well. Make sure you join Bet365 and play your bracket for free before the opening round games tip off. It's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 or older or 18 or older in Kentucky and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, and Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms and conditions and restrictions apply. All right, we're back to the draft here, snake style, so it's back-to-back for Charlie. Who are you adding on after that wonderful Morehead pick? Not to say that I'm jealous. I was hoping that they would hang around to the end of the draft. Who are you pairing them up with?
Yeah, so it's slim pickings now for the Cinderellas, and I don't think the 15, 16s are even worth a look this year, given all the bid stealers. So I'm going to go with a team and attack a fraudulent team, and I'm going to take Charleston here against Alabama. I'm going to split it up again, just like I did the last few. And this Charleston team is one of the most interesting in college hoops because they shoot about 50% of all attempts from the perimeter, and I think that three-point variance is going to play a huge role here against Alabama. Both teams shoot the three ball at a near 50% rate. They both run and gun, high tempo. This is a game with a total of 173 right now. I think that might even be too low considering the lack of defense on both sides. And I think this is a great way to attack Alabama. They're not great on the interior. They give up a lot of second chance opportunities. They foul at a high rate, and they just frankly don't turn you over. And they can't overpower Charleston, I think, on the defensive end. And it's going to allow for a guy like Rain Smith to take over. Rain Smith is a microwave scorer, second in the entire country in this field of 68 in three-pointers made. He's hitting it at a 40% clip, over 100 threes made. We saw in the CAA championship, he put up 6 threes, 28 points, was a huge reason in that overtime win for Charleston to get past Stony Brook. He doesn't turn the ball over. He gets to the free throw line well. He shoots the free throws at an elite rate. Top 30 in the entire country in offensive rating. So when I look at a team like Charleston here, when they don't turn the ball over and Alabama can't force turnovers, and Charleston, they rebound well on both ends of the floor. I think they should be able to, despite the size discrepancy, despite the physicality, playing a high major talent versus a mid-major talent, be able to overcome that. Alabama in the last month, outside of the top 60 per Bart Torvik, their defense is the main reason why they're outside the top 200 in efficiency right now. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for an upset to brew. And, going off the Grand Canyon pick, just thinking that this section right here is where there's a lot of fraudulent teams in the region.
All right, if the point guard is a microwave scorer, would Brozovic on the low block be a crock pot kind of scorer? It's going to take 40 minutes. He'll probably get to double digits, but he has to do the dirty work for them. He's really their only competent big at over 6'10". He has to play well in the paint for them to win, no?
Right. Yeah, he was my other Prince Charming possibility, right? Like I was thinking would it be the three-point shooter of Rain Smith or Brozovic? But Brozovic is the key here because the interior defense of Alabama is a weak point and an area you want to attack, both off the offensive glass and just in general. They're soft and they foul a lot on the interior. So yeah, Brozovic's going to be a huge key here, especially getting the offensive rebounds, either kicking it out to Rain Smith or just being able to put it back inside the net. So I think that when it comes to it, listen, you're going to need him to step up in a huge way. He can also stretch the floor, and a lot of these Alabama guys are not as keen on defending the perimeter, and they've really struggled against bigger size forwards and big men. So, yeah, I think this is brewing for an upset here, and Brozovic is definitely one guy that we could see even heat up with a couple threes, too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year, you can make the argument that Charleston had a stronger overall team, but the matchup was just a tough draw against San Diego State in that opening round down in Orlando. San Diego State ends up making a run all the way to the national title game.
Yep.
How much of this was you were in love with the Cougs, and how much of it was you were fading the Tide?
I think the majority of it that I'm fading the Tide. Like I think Cougs are a good team. I don't think they're a bad team, and they're trending in the right direction, right? Like at least they won through the CAA. It wasn't pretty, but they won. And ever since that midseason kind of kerfuffle they had, they've played strong. So then you look at it, they shoot a lot of threes. Just a 3-point variance is such a big reason to back an underdog in these games. And Alabama shoots a lot of threes. Charleston shoots a lot of threes. So when I look at this all together, I just think Alabama is such a vulnerable team, and no team could be trending worse entering the tournament than the Tide, which maybe is a reason to maybe like back them because everyone's going to be fading them. But I'm just going to keep going down on it. I think this is a bad matchup for the Tide, given the fact that Charleston will go shot for shot with them from the perimeter and have the ability and capability to, obviously just a little bit less talented overall.
All right, Dundo, I feel like I'm going pretty vanilla in terms of my portfolio. I just have a team and a pick. Are you also mixing it up with multiple angles, Sweet 16, upset, first half money line? Like, how are you attacking your next pick?
I think the Charleston point, like, I like them on the money line more than I like them on the spread, right? Because this could get ugly if the threes aren't falling, and Alabama's turnover differential, awful. Big issue for them in SEC play coming down the stretch. I'm going to go with Colorado, who plays in the first four in Dayton on Wednesday, plus 750 to make the Sweet 16. I'm going to put a third of a unit on that. So I'm going with the Buffs. SCO Buffs, look, they finally showed toward the end of the season that they could win away from Boulder, and I think that was a problem they had throughout the non-conference and even going into the early part of the conference season. But they got some big wins, UCLA, USC, Oregon on the road, some difficult atmospheres and environments. It's always hard to win on the road in the Pac-12 because of how much travel there is. So they finally, played closer to their talent level, and then we saw them, get to the final of the Pac-12 championship. Look, anytime they have 3 NBA draft picks on your team, 2 guys who could go in the lottery, I think you have to be intrigued about this team having real upside. It's a double-digit seed who is favored to make to make it into the field of 64 against Boise on Wednesday. Then they would get a matchup with Florida, who just lost their most valuable player, I would argue, in Hingloden, who is a huge rim protector for them, a big scorer in the interior. Their defense had already been a bit of a shaky period, and I don't really trust Florida's half-court offense late in games. I think it's been a problem for them all year. And then we would get Marquette, likely Marquette, in the second round, who doesn't really know what the status of Tyler Kolek is, and that offense goes as he goes. So, one of the great point guard matchups you can see with KJ Simpson and Tyler Kolek, well, I think Simpson matches up decently well with him, but if Kolek isn't 100%, we saw last year a hand injury for Kolek is what really knocked them out of the tournament. Their offense was not nearly as efficient. They had turnover problems because he wasn't quite 100% in the tournament. That could be a huge red flag for them in this game, potentially against Colorado. Every year, since the first 4 started, except one, there has been a team that has won a game in the field and gotten to the second round from the first 4. So 2019 was the only season where a team from the first 4 that won a game did not then advance to the round of 32. And we've also seen 5 teams make the second weekend. So there is precedence for these kind of runs. The first 4 to the Sweet 16, first 4 all the way to the Final 4 has been done on multiple occasions. So using it as, like you say, a springboard to get going in this tournament, playing 3 games in 5 days will not be easy. Of course, there's also the elevation angle for Colorado. But my Prince Charming for this team is going to be KJ Simpson. Their biggest flaw offensively is turnovers. They have to limit those better than they do. They go inside a lot, and their bigs turn the ball over a lot. That's a big red flag for them. But if Simpson is efficient and effective at protecting the ball and making this offense go to work, I think they can overcome potential turnover differentials by taking better care of the ball.
So I got 2 questions for you, because I love Colorado, and I bet them, I don't know how many times I had them to win the Pac-12 tournament. They go through this gauntlet that is going through the Pac-12 tournament. Then they have a quick turnaround, first 4 game. Then they have to play in the round of 64, and then the round of 32. Are you worried about, A, fatigue at all, and B, away from home, they've had their issues at times? Is this just one of those things you're hoping with Cody Williams getting back to full health, the roster finally clicks to the potential they have? Because I agree with you, they're a top 20 team.
Exactly right. Cody Williams, maybe a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. Like there's that kind of buzz, and they did deal with injuries, right? So you could make an argument that, like, okay, first of all, if you just look at their efficiency metrics relative to their seed, they were clearly underseeded. It makes sense given that they had all those injuries. It was kind of like Creighton last year, where Creighton was a 6 seed. they were a top 15 team by all the metrics because they had a period where Kalkbrenner was out. They had, not a ton of depth, so those big pieces missing was huge for them.
Right.
That's where Colorado comes into this season because they also didn't have De Silva for a handful of games in the middle of the season too. So you've got Cody Williams, De Silva, Eddie Lampkin, who I know is on your bad list right now, but still can rebound with the best of them.
Dante.
Yeah, couldn't guard Dante, and so they're not going to face a ton of pick and roll offenses now that Hingloden's out as well. So I think that just the NBA talent that they have is their glass slipper. It's when we get into this tournament setting and they just roll the balls out. They have 3 dudes who are going to play at the next level. None of the teams they're playing in the first 3 matches will have that. I think Iguodala is probably Marquette's only pro. And so they're going to have a real talent advantage. Whether that translates on the court is to be seen, but at plus 750, I'm going to roll with the Buffs, SKO Buffs, to make the Sweet 16. I could look foolish before this draft, before the tournament even technically starts on Thursday with one of my picks out, but for 0.33 units, it's worth it.
All right, we're going to go ahead and stay in the Rocky Mountain State. I'm going to go far away, actually not far away at all, Fort Collins, Colorado. Colorado State, another play-in team with the potential to use that as a way to step in to the field of 64 with momentum. I like them to upset Texas in the round of 64, and it starts with their Prince Charming, arguably the best point guard in the entire country. The fact that he wasn't a Cousy finalist, I think, is absolutely criminal and just shows the bias when it comes to high major versus mid-major basketball. But Isaiah Stevens has been someone who's been dominant throughout his entire career. He started 151 games and now enters the tournament as someone who's kind of a combo guard because he's gone off and scored 20-plus points on 7 different occasions this year. He also is someone who is a knockdown shooter, shoots nearly 45% from 3, 84% from the line, and he is a maestro running Medved's offense, which is this complicated offense that can be a hybrid motion offense. They utilize Princeton elements. They sometimes can go 5 out, lots of picking and screening at the top of the key, and that's what makes it difficult to game plan for them. I know that they draw Tony Bennett, arguably one of the greatest defensive coaches in the history of college basketball, but if they can get by them in the play-in game, winning a game, I would argue probably first team to 55 wins, going ahead in this matchup and moving to to play against a Texas team, I'm not sure that Texas can take advantage of the obvious issues for Colorado State. Height is an issue. Interior defense is an issue. But as the season progressed, they got better. They actually cracked the top 100 in 2-point percentage defense. Patrick Cartier was able to stay healthy and stay out of foul trouble in a lot of their games. And I think more has been made about Colorado State's height issues and issues in their front court than really is justified. So at this point, when they go on to play Texas, I think this is a Texas team that when you look at what they've accomplished in the past 6 weeks away from home, what's their best win? Beating Texas Tech. The Red Raiders were shorthanded in that game. They end up shooting 30% from 3. That's it. So I view this as a Colorado State team that survived a really rugged Mountain West Conference. You could say that it was the 3rd or 4th best conference in America. I don't think anybody would blink. So the fact of the matter is, I think they're playing their best basketball and they've been tested, whereas Texas has kind of, cruised along. They've had some empty calories with some easy wins in the Big 12, and I'm not sure that they're going to be able to hold up against Isaiah Stevens, who has March Hero written all over him.
I want to ask you the same question that you asked Anthony all the way back in round 1, which is the Mountain West traditionally struggles in the NCAA tournament. Are you nervous at all with them, especially against a guy like Tony Bennett in Virginia, and then so on, just the Mountain West, or you just think that's an overplayed narrative as well?
So luckily for Virginia, they can't make a shot. I mean, inside the 2-point arc, or inside the 3-point arc, they're in the mid 200s in terms of shooting efficiency. They also, if it's a close game, just foul them. They were close to setting an ACC record, the kind of record you don't want to set, for the worst foul shooting performance for a season. They shot sub 64%. It cost them in the ACC tournament. And I think what's interesting is that it can allow Medved and his staff to say, let's be even more aggressive with, basically closing out on players. If you foul them, send them to the line, so be it. Because Virginia's only calling card, the only thing that they do well is they can knock down threes. There's a chance for them to make 10 or 11 threes. But if that's not happening, I just don't see how they score beyond 55 points in this game. And Colorado State has proven throughout the year that they can win high-scoring games, or they can also play in those rock fights. I think the misconception is because their offense can look so smooth at times, oh, they're a run-and-gun team. That's not true. They're actually in the 160s in terms of tempo, so I don't think they're going to be outside their comfort zone playing against Virginia.
Both offenses like to execute late in the shot clock. Colorado State's better at it. But Virginia has Beekman. That's the scary thing for me going up against Isaiah Stevens. That's the perfect. If you had to pick one guy in the country to stop Isaiah Stevens, I might pick Beekman. So I bet the under in the game, Colorado State. So I think it's going to be a rock fight, but it should be a close one.
All right, let's take a look at a recap of all of our picks now that we have 3 rounds in the books, 3 teams each for our Cinderella draft. So we started, and Charlie led us off with Grand Canyon, then Dundo taking New Mexico. I followed up with Drake. Snake draft, I got another pick, fired on McNeese and Will Wade to lead his redemption tour. Dundo with James Madison, and the Dukes looking for 31 wins, or is it 32 wins?
32.
32 wins, holy moly. The Dukes have been so good this year, and somehow I think they're flying under the radar. It's kind of amazing.
If you're going by total wins, it's UConn at 31, JMU 31, top 2 in the country. So there you go.
Back to Charlie at the end of the second round with Morehead State, hitching his wagon to Riley Minix, and going with a fade job on Alabama, Charleston as a 13 seed. Dundo taking a play-in team in Colorado, and I followed suit to wrap up the draft with Colorado State getting off the mat tonight against Virginia in the play-in game.
That's 3 elevation teams for us.
Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong? At this point, as I said in the bracket reveal show, just, put some balloons on top of this arena, get it up to 4,200 feet, and I think we're in business.
It's going to be interesting tomorrow if Colorado State loses to Virginia. You're already out of team. I'm going to have to give you some much needed crap on our bracket reveal show.
All right, 30 seconds each. What do you think about your 3 teams?
I love my 3 teams. I think that all 3 have the potential to take advantage of weaknesses. I love Grand Canyon. They're my favorite Cinderella team. That's why I sprinkled on each to both win in the round of 64 and the 32, because all these teams have the ability to slow the game down, to make a lot of shots. Charleston in particular make a lot of threes. So I'm excited for the 3 I have. I'm happy I got to fade the fraudulent Alabama team that I've been fading every single game in the past 10.
Tony, what are your thoughts on your 3?
So, my games aren't until Friday. So I've got some time here. Last year I won with the first pick of the draft, the first game with Furman. This year I'm going to win by coming back late.
Well, unless Colorado loses tomorrow.
That's all right. I still got 2 teams Friday night. We'll be ready.
Even though I had the 3rd overall pick, having to take advantage of that snake draft element, I still think I got 3 great players that I could, go to war with anytime. I got Tucker DeVries, I got Shahada Wells, and I have Isaiah Stevens. In this tournament, more so than anything, you look at the montage, the one shining moment, it's those players who put the team on their back. So at least I have some quality players, top 25 in overall national efficiency, to say they can impact the game in more ways than one. All right, that is it for us. This has been Road to the Final Score, presented by Bet365, and our Cinderella draft now in the books. Hopefully our Prince Charmings get us to and from the ball, and we can celebrate with them after the second weekend, cashing some of those Sweet 16 tickets. If not, we'll all be turning into pumpkins, and you can roast us over on social media. It's a win-win for everyone who's been listening in. Thanks so much for joining us. Special thanks to our experts who dialed in as well, Dr. Nick and Dano Mataya. And that's it for us. Thanks so much for listening.